Winning pots is always good, but doubling up is even better. So today I want to review a hand with you that I recently played with pocket kings and see if we can get that full double up. Let's get into it. Good morning, how are we doing today? My name is James Sweeney, aka SplitSuit, and today we'll review a hand that I recently played at a live 2-5 session over at Hollywood in Columbus, Ohio. Unfortunately, I did not have permission to get vlog footage, so we're just going to recreate the hand history, but this is exactly the details of the hand. Let's get into it. Alright, so again, this is a 2-5 hand. We open raise under the gun to 15 with pocket kings. Obviously, open raising kings is totally standard, and the size of 15 was doing just fine at this table. A lot of players were choosing 15 or 20 bucks, so totally standard as is. Nothing to really discuss here. We end up getting called by the next player to act, a squeeze from the button up to 55, and it folds around back to us. Alright, so as for who these players are, Under the Gun +1 is new to the table. He just bought in for a max of $1,000, and the button is someone who I've been playing with for a few hours, and they've squeezed me once before in a similar situation where I was the original raiser, and they have done this kind of squeeze a couple of times overall in this session, but overall they're not incredibly loose, incredibly tight, they're just kind of average. And my personal image right this moment was pretty typical tag, and the button seems to be aware of that to some extent. I have been outed twice by this point by people not in the game, people that just came over and said hello, and this is my first time in the room, so I didn't really know what to expect, but the table itself, no one playing in this game has asked or discussed who I am as far as I can tell. So as for my actual action here, obviously folding is completely off the table, so it's really between calling and going for the 4-bet, and I decide to just call it in this situation. Now if we were to take this actual situation and run it through the GTO Ranges app and set it all up in the live RGTO solve, you notice that when we open under the gun, MP calls, button decides to go for the squeeze, that when we look at our range from the under the gun player, we have very little in terms of calling here, right? These bolded selections are the technical call versus 3-bets in this spot, and because you see very minimal blue on a lot of these, it's just not included all that much. However, if we look at 4-betting, you notice the big stuff is getting 4-bet, so kings plus ace king, and then a little bit in terms of the ace 5 suited, pocket queens, pocket jacks. But you notice overall the solver is definitely preferring that pocket kings get slotted into a 4-bet as opposed to just calling. And as a pure default, I'm also going to 4-bet in this situation, but I did think the calling was going to be a little bit better here for two major reasons. One, it massively underreps my hand, and I think button is going to make a lot of mistakes against that, whether this goes heads up or multi-way. And then number two is I wanted to allow Under the Gun +1 to get involved as well. Creates a fairly small SPR, it's going to be very easy to play post flop, and while this person is newer to the table, they didn't look particularly good, and as such I was okay sacrificing a little bit by just calling here and giving them an opportunity to get involved as well. So as it rolls out, Under the Gun +1 does end up finding the fold button pretty quickly, and we end up going heads up to a flop of 8-8 deuce with 2 hearts. I decide to check, opponent decides to c-bet for $80 into a 132 pot, and they'd been c-betting pretty much any single time they got an opportunity. Not a huge sample of single raise pot versus 3-bet pot data, but I did think that they were probably going to c-bet this with both the value and bluff side of their spectrum pretty confidently and pretty regularly. So for what it's worth, I don't think there's too much to read into the $80 sizing either, so at this point, what I'd like you to do is leave a comment down below. Let me know if you would check call this or if you would check raise it. If you would check raise it, to what number? Because I assume you're never going to check fold it. So again, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you would do in this exact situation. Now as for what I decided to do in this situation, I decided to check raise this up to 215 total. And my check raise does 3 major things. One, it puts more money in when the button has a pocket pair or other kind of hand that they have no real interest in folding, and I do quite well against a decent chunk of those. Obviously if they have kings plus, just simply sucks to be us. Number 2, it gives them the perfect amount to 3-bet shove the flop if they want to bluff that way. And then number 3, it looks pretty darn silly, the check raise that I'm making here, because most people would not expect that I'm going to check raise here with a very strong hand very often, right? If I had 8x or pocket aces, am I really going to be check raising here a lot of the time? Most people probably assume no, and as such I think are more likely to get very sticky when they have any sort of pocket pair or even possibly an ace king, ace queen kind of hand, because again, what am I really repping by making this this kind of play. So as it rolls out, villain thinks for a little bit and ends up making that call. The turn is the 9 of spades, I think for a couple of moments, and then end up punching the entire thing in. Alright, so for giggles, what I want to do is run this through the solver real quick, and this is kind of an interesting one for a couple different reasons. So the first reason this is interesting is that when you use the GTO ranges, the ones from the app that we looked at earlier, remember that there was not a tremendous amount of calling versus the squeeze in that spot. So because of that, when we actually look at hero's range, right after they check, after they face a bet, and then there they are on the flop facing that bet, how many combos are in hero's range? 1.7 combos. Right? So regardless of what analysis you get out of this, we're talking about less than 2 combinations of hands. So this is not going to be particularly useful, and mostly because we're looking at so few combinations being involved even just from preflop. And so you might think, okay, well this isn't going to be particularly useful at all, and I'm inclined to agree with you. So let's throw in some slightly wider ranges, right? Let's throw in something that's a little bit more exploitative, maybe a little bit more representative of what actual people are doing in this game. Well, one thing we notice, again, hero decided to check in this situation, but you notice the solver actually likes betting, just donking right into villain right this moment. So again, a lot more combos included, that's great, but once we go for the check raise, I mean, how often is that happening? 19% of hands are going to do that, your opponent's only betting in about half the time, again, according to the solver, and then the check raise is coming in 5% of the time. So that's how many combinations? 0.6. Again, not incredibly useful, but just in case you're really interested to see what the solver would do in that spot, after we check raise, after we get called, turn is the 9 of spades, hero decides to jam it, and yeah, pocket kings is pretty much a jam. That's great, but we're talking about 0.2 combinations. So doesn't really matter all that much. Alright, so because we are pretty darn far outside of solver land, let's talk about what I'm doing here and why I think jamming is best. Alright, so a lot of this boils down to what I think the button would just call the check raise with on the flop. And I think that's really going to be done with a few kind of hands. I think there's going to be things like flush draws, so maybe like an ace X of hearts kind of hand. Maybe they think it has some sort of showdown value and they're like, well, it'd be better just to call here and induce rather than go for the 3-bang shove on the flop. So I think we're looking at some kind of heart or drawy combinations, and again, there's not going to be that many being that it's a paired board. So you have some of that, plus also keep in mind we have the king of hearts in our hand, so we block out some chunk of extra flush draws, so yeah, okay, maybe they have flush draws occasionally. And then beyond that, we're looking at things like pocket pairs that I think make realistic sense to get sticky with on that flop, and then maybe the occasional like floated out hand, and I don't think it's going to be like complete nonsense. Maybe it'll be like a jack 10 of spades, something with like a double backdoor draw, which obviously the 9 of spades is impacting for sure. However, it could also be things like ace queen or ace jack that I think they're going to get a little more sticky with. They're going to view it as some sort of showdown value, especially on the 8-8 deuce flop, when again, what am I really representing? Am I really repping that strong, or is it very, very weak polarized in their eyes? So again, they kind of have not a tremendous amount of like pure air or kind of weakish stuff that I think they're very incentivized to shove with if I decide to check to them. I think they have more hands they're likely to just get sticky with right this moment. I hadn't seen them barrel off their entire stack. I don't really think that I think they're more likely to take more of like a softer, more showdown value-y approach, and if I check, they check behind on the turn. When they have things like a pocket pair they're not super comfortable with, or they have something like ace queen, I think they're more likely to check that behind. So you could try to run the argument out of, okay, if you check here and it goes check check, does that maximize mistake potential on the river as opposed to trying to get most of the money in right this moment, or all the money in right this moment? And I personally think that villain is going to make more mistakes if I jam right this moment. I don't think there's enough air, again, to incentivize going for a check on the turn to allow them to jam all of those busted hearts or whatever. I just don't think there's enough of that in this exact reason. So because of that, I really like shoving, really try to capitalize when they have a sticky pair or a sticky ace high. I think that's going to be better than just checking here, which I know a lot of players will end up doing. And now, the moment of truth. Let's see what we got the double up from, and we didn't get the double up. Villain ended up folding after a couple minutes of thinking, and we end up winning a nice medium-sized pot. but unfortunately we completely whiffed the double up. So of course I have no idea exactly what villain folded here, but I can almost guarantee you that they're probably folding too often in this situation, because again, they shouldn't have too many hands in their range right this moment that they're super interested in folding. Again, it's not like this was something that's not going to happen a decent chunk of the time after someone like me decides to check raise the flop. So they probably called the flop a little bit without a plan and got themselves into a little bit of trouble here. So not complaining about a nice sized pot shipping our direction, but the double up definitely would have been nice. So if you like my line overall, give the video a thumbs up, I'd massively appreciate it. If you don't, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you would do instead, what your sizes would look like, what your exact line would look like, and let's go from there. Otherwise, if you're looking for more information on those preflop ranges, definitely from the GTO side of things, make sure to look at the entire GTO Ranges app. You can download it for free, redchippoker.com/app to get started. All of the open raising ranges are totally for free, or you can unlock the app and get everything. And if you want to see a full video walking you through a bunch of those open raising ranges, definitely make sure to click that video right up there. Check it out, and I can't wait to hear what you think about it. Otherwise, enjoy. I'll see you back shortly with a brand new video. In the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.